Grace and peace, you guys. Welcome back to Unshakable. Listen, today, you guys, I am here to report. We need to talk about the verdict in the trial of Carmelo Anthony out in Frisco, Texas. And you guys, this case has been incredibly tragic, in my opinion. And it's a tragedy well before it's a political talking point. And so I want to make it clear that I do take this case very serious. I take the implications and the outcome of what has happened in this verdict very seriously. We have a young teen. Austin Metcalf is dead. His family will never get him back. And then we have Carmelo Anthony, who has now been found guilty of murder, and his family is also facing the devastating consequences of his actions. And so what I want to do is I want to talk about what it is that we know and what we learned from this case. So according to testimony that has been publicly reported, you had Austin Metcalf and Carmelo Anthony. They both became involved in a confrontation during the track meet. Okay, I'll bring you up to speed. You had witnesses testify. Anthony was sitting under a tent associated with Austin Metcalf's school team. Austin reportedly tells him, "Sir, you need to leave." Well, he didn't say sir, but basically, you need to leave. Words get exchanged. Witnesses testified that Carmelo Anthony warned Metcalf not to touch him. That testimony is true. But at some point, Metcalf pushes Anthony, and there is a dispute to the degree or the extent that he was pushed. But ultimately, subsequently after that, Anthony then stabs Metcalf one time in the chest. That is what we know. Austin Metcalf succumbs to his wounds and dies then. Those are the broad facts. Those, for the most part, are not or do not appear to be in serious dispute. The dispute, however, is whether this stabbing constituted lawful self-defense. Lawful self-defense. These are legal terms, which means we got to get our emotions out of this. You have to take your emotions out because that is what the jury was there to determine. Not Twitter, not Facebook, not the people on the TikTok who claim to have seen the video. It was the jury's job to determine if Carmelo Anthony's defense constituted and met the legal requirements for self-defense. Now, with that said, what struck me most, like I said about this case, was the amount of misinformation that spread almost immediately. I mean, some of the stories I heard, I said, now I know you lied.
Right.
Coming walking back up.
Right.
On the video, you can see those four that actually was involved, and maybe about 3 or 4 others that was with them, skipping up, trying to catch up behind. One veered off probably toward his way to go to the coach and kind of distract him a little bit. And then the other 4 came walking together. One went in front of them, went past.
Right.
The other 4 went and they surrounded Carmelo. You know, if you're Carmelo.
And they showed that on that video.
It's on the video.
Okay, come on.
You can see them walk
I'm going
up.
to say little stuff.
I'll put it this way.
Okay.
They actually tell you when you're watching the video, pay attention to this corner right here, because if you look anywhere else, you might miss different things.
Okay.
So watch those 4. Here they're 4 right there coming up.
Right.
That's exactly what they say.
Okay.
And so you have no way to be confused that it's those 4.
Okay.
So they come up, they surround them, and this immediate moment of not even a few seconds of pause, then that's when they jump. And so
they actually did jump him.
Yeah, it wasn't just no touch. It wasn't just all that moment. Yeah, it was a push. It was all kind of things. But Austin pushed, Hunter hit, and then everybody swung. But at the same time,
So it's more than the twins that got some licks
all
on
4.
them. So it showed that in the video.
Yes, in the video.
I mean, folks was just making it up as they go.
Because everyone keeps talking about, oh, you don't bring a knife to a fist fight. You do if you are being beaten to an ounce of your life. That's what happens. If you are being beaten up to the point where you feel your life is in danger, yes, you can escalate to a knife. That's what happens.
There was video played of the incident inside of the courtroom that showed Austin to be the aggressor, Austin confronting Karmelo, Austin pushing Karmelo, Austin then getting stuck by Karmelo. But it also showed Austin's brother, Hunter, being at the center of the fight. He also put hands on Karmelo, and so did some of their other friends. Witnesses said that at least 5, in fact, not just witnesses, but it's also on video, at least 5 of them jumped Karmelo. The witness never mentioned jumping Karmelo. Other witnesses for Austin never mentioned jumping Karmelo. They jumped him. What do you expect to happen if a person has a weapon on them and they will not hesitate to use that weapon? What do you think is going to happen if that person gets jumped?
Putting their credibility on the line and without wanton abandon, just lying on the internet, pushing forth narratives that could not be substantiated. So many people claim that Anthony had been jumped by multiple people, that he had been severely beaten, even though his mugshot doesn't show any evidence of him being beat up. Right? You had others claiming facts that just were not supported by not one, but like multiple witness testimonies. And yet, despite all of that, despite many people, they accepted those claims, the misinformation claims, without question. Like if you try, I watched Tamira Neely's coverage of this, and she interviewed one woman, and she was like, well, what about the 4 people who beat him up? And I'm like, lady, you right here at the courthouse, and you just now know, or just now learning that never happened?
There's no reason why he should have pulled out a knife. You don't do something like that. You fight it out like a man.
What would you say to them saying that it was 4 against 1?
It wasn't 4 against 1. None of the evidence points to that. And the people who thought that happened, the prosecutor literally, it was 2 people who said that they thought that it, well, at least one, who said that he saw a U shape of people, right? That was his first initial statement. I saw a U shape of people surrounding Carmelo and, that whole situation. Then he said he saw an L shape. Then the prosecutor, which talked to him on multiple occasions, then showed him evidence where he said, okay, here's you on the field. And we could see him warming up and all of that stuff. And then he said, here is where the 10 is. As you can see, you didn't actually see the actual stabbing. You saw right after it happened. When the people started surrounding and then some of them started running and all of that stuff. You didn't actually see when it happened.
I was just like, wow, the disinformation campaign in this case was strong. So many people accepted those claims without question. Why? Because the story fit the outcome that they wanted. For some people, you guys, the standard was no longer truth. A new standard had been erected, and that standard was race. Basically, it was if the defendant is Black, then automatically we have to assume innocence. And if the victim is white, they automatically assumed guilt. That is tribalism. That is not justice. That is unrighteous tribalism. And so as a believer, I'm just imploring Christians to reject that completely. Because some people are not asking, well, what happened? What were the facts? They're not interested in the facts. They're basically asking, well, whose side am I supposed to be on? Based on how I feel, right? I mean, that's a completely different question. And the disparity between those two questions reveals a completely different heart. A person that's approaching this with a biblical worldview would ask, what is true? A person that's approaching this with a tribal worldview would ask, well, which side looks like me? Those are not the same thing. One is justice and one is absolutely sin because it's showing partiality. We are told to show partiality in judging is not good. And I think that's what has happened in this situation. When we think about what has happened, you have a young man is dead, another young man's future is hanging in the balance, and 2 families have been completely devastated. So instead of mourning the reality of those things, people are immediately turning this into a racial team sport. I mean, it was sickening to watch the amount of fundraising that took place. People raising funds, taking sides, crafting narratives that are unsubstantiated and couldn't be proven. And some people never stopped to ask whether or not those narratives were actually true. They just believed them. They just believed it, and that should concern every single one of us, because one day it could be you. It could be you in the situation where people have the facts and they ignore the facts because the facts don't matter to them. It's just based on how they feel. Truth can never be secondary to identity, because when that happens, at that point, it is impossible to determine justice. You can't have justice where truth doesn't matter. You can't have justice where evidence is gone out the window. And you can't have justice where skin color determines whether somebody is guilty or innocent. That is the mindset that has become increasingly common in this case, and it is one of the reasons why our society has become so divided. People no longer evaluate facts. It's what tribe do you belong to? They're not even asking what happened or any of that. It is a very sinful way to think. And it's one of the reasons why I have not covered this story as extensively, because I just don't have time for the ignorant trolls, and I'd rather watch and pray. That's what I prefer to do. So at the end of the day, here's what we know according to the biblical standard. The Bible teaches that all people are created in the image of God. Not some people, all. So that means Austin Metcalf was made in the image of God, and Carmelo Anthony was made in the image of God. Right? Like both truths can and have to exist simultaneously. One doesn't cancel out the other because one is a color that you don't like. Like, you don't have to hate Carmelo Anthony to care about Austin Metcalf. And you don't have to hate Austin Metcalf to believe that Carmelo Anthony deserved due process. You can actually care about both. You can care about both, you can acknowledge both, and you can seek justice for both. What's so beautiful to me about biblical justice is that it is not a zero-sum game. And I know I usually say a lot of things that make people uncomfortable. But I believe what this case exposed is a deeper problem. I'm going to just go ahead and say it. Not all, but within parts of the Black community. Sadly, we've become conditioned to think of everything in terms of race, and we will show racial solidarity for no other reason other than it's because they are Black. We'll show racial solidarity, and we'll throw out the ability to think sober-mindedly and morally about a situation to where we're not asking, well, what is right? The question then becomes, well, is he Black? And if the answer is yes, many people, they stop their analysis right there. That is not righteousness. That is definitely not biblical justice. That is ethnic partiality, ethnic favoritism. And if we're just going to be honest, I condemn that kind of behavior regardless of what side you find it on. We should condemn it. If there's white folks saying we need to stand with the Metcalf family because he's white, that is wrong. Justice cannot have two standards. The same standard must apply to everyone, regardless of ethnic expression, class, political party, every ideology, every person. Because once justice becomes tribal and you have to mark certain check boxes in order for justice to be applied rightly, eventually everyone is going to become a victim of it. So quickly, I just wanted to report that the verdict is in. The jury has yielded a guilty verdict, and Carmelo Anthony has been found guilty of murder. And this is not anything to celebrate. There are no winners here, right? Both families are hurting, one family more so than the other. But this whole situation should sober us, because many people, in my opinion, today believe that correcting one injustice gives them permission to commit another, and it doesn't. Wrong is still wrong. Showing partiality is still partiality, and sin is still sin. And another thing I'd like to say, sin makes you stupid. It does. The sinfulness in the heart of man can lead people to do sinful and stupid things. And in this case, it is so unfortunate that this young man who had his entire life ahead of him chose to make a split-second decision that is now impacting the rest of his natural-born life and has snuffed out the life of Austin Metcalf's natural-born life. Teach your children conflict resolution. If you feel afraid and you feel threatened, the first knee-jerk reaction to a shove is not a knife to the chest. You could have walked away. You could have just exited stage left when you were asked to leave. Every battle doesn't need to be fought with a weapon or where loss of life has to be the result. This story is very, very sad, but the guilty verdict is now in, and I'm curious to know, what do you guys think? Do you believe that the jury returned an appropriate verdict based on the evidence that was presented? Not how you feel, but based on the evidence, based on the facts that were presented. Once we took into account those who bore false witness and lied, and look, it is what it is. That happened. But I want to hear from you, particularly if you are a Christian. Let me know if you were looped into having an emotional reaction but chose not to. So I'm curious to know what you think. Leave me your comments down in the box below. And until next time, you guys, stand firm, stay bold, and above all else, stay unshakable. Grace and peace.
The chronic victim can never be trusted, says Carl Jung.
Because I want you to know that I am more offended as an African-American woman than you will ever be.
The chronic victim can never be trusted.
The reason we could never be who we wanted and dreamed to be in is you kept your knee on our neck. We could run corporations and not hustle in the street, but you had your knee on our neck. We had creative skills. We could do whatever anybody else could do, but we couldn't get your knee off our neck.
The chronic victim can never be trusted.
It's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps.
Stay on your knees. Stay on the plantation, boy. I've decided to be a free man. Slavery is a choice.